Ho ho ho! Bonjour, sirs and madames! Welcome to my Michelin star restaurant. We have a 5-meal course for you this evening. 5 delectable tales of fright from the undead world of 68. Our first entree, Hallowed Ground, recounts the epic last stand of a group of survivors trapped in a church. The next treat, Peece and Love, is a high schooler soap opera that turns to a bloodbath when the zombie apocalypse begins. And then there is Dodgers, which follows twin brothers smuggled into Canada to escape the Vietnam War draft. And let's just say, they find a little bit more than poutine up there. Our next dish is a real conversation starter, Hardship, a story of an unstable soldier in a world gone to hell. A kind of darkened version of our good friend Jungle Jim. Well, if he never had managed to channel his insanity into something productive, that is. But our grand finale answers the question scientists have been asking for generations. What if the Zodiac killer began his spree during a zombie apocalypse? Oh yes, all that and more is to be found in today's incredible episode. Hey guys, I'm your host Juan, back again for another 68 video. Today, due to your express demand, we are covering the various 68 one-shots and short stories. That's right, 5 distinct vignettes, all written by Mark Kidwell with colors by Fotos. I'll mention the various artists who did each book as we go along. Before we begin, I'll repeat the information I left at the end of last video with, that there is going to be a 68 compendium collecting the entire series in one book coming out soon. I see conflicting information about the dates, but sometime next month, okay? I'm not at all associated with this book, or the creators, by the way. I just have come to understand that it's gotten prohibitively expensive to collect the series. Just looking out for you guys. But whatever the case, if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you can stay in the loop with all the latest videos. And if you really like what you see, consider signing up for my membership program. But alrighty then, let's see what we got going on here. So our first story is titled Hallowed Ground, and it's a one-shot from 2013. The art was originally begun by artist Josh Meadors. However, unfortunately, he passed away and was unable to finish this story. And so the rest of the art was filled out by Kyle Charles. So, rest in peace, and let's enjoy his gift. Our story opens on a battered church on the outskirts of Mississippi. It's February 13th, 1968, the day the dead came back to life. And we're dropped in the middle of the action. We're informed that there was some kind of train crash, and a small handful of survivors made it out and fled to the nearby church. In fact, there are 7 total survivors holding out there against the relentless mob of zombies. 5 people are on the ground floor here, and there are 2 more upstairs, who we'll see in a few minutes. Anyway, the downstairs group consists of a sheriff, a young boy, an old woman, the priest, and a GI who just got back from Vietnam. His name is Apple, a nickname short for Apollyon, which the raving priest shouts is the Greek name for the devil. Apple points his weapon at the man and tells him to shut the fuck up, and the soldier explains that his father was Greek and his mother Creole, and that he was an unexpected baby, and his mother died giving birth to him. And so Apple's father blamed him for her death and named him after the devil. A lifetime of his father's hatred imbued Apple with guilt and self-hatred, and he took this with him to Vietnam, and then back home again to America. There is a heavy silence, which is broken by the trembling voice of the young child. He sniffles and wipes away a tear and tells Apple that his mama died too. The sheriff tried to save her, but the monsters tore her apart. Apple kneels down and promises the boy that it's going to be okay. They're all soldiers now, and he needs to remain strong. And so everyone starts prepping for a last stand, but it's going to be a tough one. The train that crashed was carrying hundreds of people, and it was purposefully derailed by a group of zombies standing on the tracks, which means there are now dozens upon dozens of the demons staggering towards them. But just then, the old woman pipes up, and she says that she actually has a car outside, but the priest quickly hushes her because he wants them all to stay and defend God's church. Apple lunges at the man and decks him across the face for withholding that critical info and trapping them in this confined box. But the time for games is over, and it's way too late. The undead shatter the windows and begin clawing their way inside. Apple and the sheriff fight back as best they can, but the numbers are simply too overwhelming. And pretty soon people start going down. The priest gets got first. He recognizes a zombie and reaches out to it like an idiot, and the soulless husk starts gnawing on his face. The old woman cries for help as well, as several pairs of rotten hands caress her. Apple swings by, and he does her a favor by shooting her in the head. The soldier then orders the kid to take cover in the altar, and he quickly unzips a jungle green bag he's carrying. It's full of frag grenades he smuggled home from Vietnam. He hands them to the sheriff and tells him to make them count. So the officer starts lopping them at the zombies, and the entire church shakes as flesh, glass, and wood explode out of the building. But it's just not enough. There is only one grenade left, and too many monsters that are too close. Apple looks at the sheriff and calmly instructs him to take a moment to himself while he still can. And with that, the man named after the devil pounces on a group of zombies. And seconds later, there is a final boom, and everything fades to black. From there, we actually rewind a few minutes backwards in time in order to get a kind of dual POV of the last stand from the perspective of the man who was upstairs the entire time, a guy named Private Matthew Angel. He's basically acting as a sniper, sharpshooting the freaks from up above, and he's not alone. Up there with him is a shivering young woman named Sarah. She leans back in the corner and asks Angel why he's keeping score of the kills he's doing by marking them down under the names of the 12 apostles. The young private explains that Jesus was the only one who could raise the dead, and obviously he wouldn't do something like this. So he rationalizes that because the Son of God granted the apostles some of his power before he departed, they must be the ones responsible. So by labeling and recording zombies under their names, Angel hopes that he's sending some kind of message to them. Sarah finds this all quite an endearing gesture, but she apologizes to Angel because she's really tired and she needs to close her eyes for a moment. She has this unbearable headache, had it ever since she got bitten by one of the creatures as she was escaping the train crash. Angel tells her it's all good, and he continues sniping away. However, he is looking out far away through his scope at a distance, which means he has a massive blind spot and he can't see what's going on closer to him. And unfortunately, a moldering zombie, missing the entire lower half of its body, has managed to crawl up to the edge of the church, and it begins using a pipe like a rope to pull itself up to the top. Angel is none the wiser though, and he keeps firing away, and the half-beast gets the jump on him, propelling itself through the window at the panicking private. The zombie mindlessly snaps at the kid, centimeters away from his face. The two desperately wrestle and roll around for control, and Angel whips out his trap card, a large blade concealed in his pant leg, and he's about to beat the SOB Charles Sumner style when an inhuman hiss emanates from behind him. It's Sarah, who has succumbed to the infection and transformed into an undead ghoul. She throws herself at Angel, but he manages to shank her. But it's mutually assured destruction, because Sarah manages to chomp on the private's inner forearm, and she rips out a chunk of flesh. He punches her in the face and scrambles down the ladder, just in time to coincide with the massive explosions from the earlier perspective, bringing the two POVs in sync. Angel is disoriented, and his eyes water as he waits for the smoke to clear, and then his heart drops. Angel discovers Apple, slouched over and mangled, with both legs blown off and saturated in a pool of his own blood. The private trips over himself, begging, pleading with Apple that he's so goddamn sorry. The bloodied soldier slowly turns his head to face Angel, and he tells him that he needs to grab the kid and go. Apparently, the lads survived the explosion there in the altar. Apple informs Angel that there are keys to the older woman's car somewhere near her body, and the final observation Apple makes is that his devil tattoo on his shoulder, it was singed off during the explosion. It's a miracle to him, because that's all he's ever wanted. 10 minutes later, Angel and the kid are speeding through the middle of nowhere on the underdeveloped dirt roads. The kid quietly asks the private where they're going, and he replies that he's looking for a town to drop the kid off in, but right now he's going to stop the car. He's going to teach the kid how to shoot, because Angel's been bitten, and he knows he's not going to last much longer. The young boy needs to learn how to kill apostles, cause the next one he meets will almost certainly be Matthew. And with that, we conclude the Hallowed Ground one-shot. Yeah, that kid probably didn't make it long on his own. Anyway, now we're on to our second story, Peece and Love. Right, so this is actually part of 68 Homefront, a 2014 4-issue miniseries split into two separate stories. All of it illustrated by Carl Charles, by the way. Anyway, let's check it out. The story opens in the fictional town of Harbinger, Pennsylvania, on February 13th, 1968. And blazing through the country roads is a trio of gossiping high school girls. They're racing toward a pep rally at the school for their final sports game of the season. They're also hitting that Mary Jane too, which probably means their left blinker's been on for the last 20 minutes. Anyway, so the girl in the back, Jenny Peece, she's our main gal, who also happened to be the homecoming queen, and who is relatively much more reserved compared to her friends. Specifically, the driver of the vehicle, Sue, who is the head cheerleader and has more of an assertive personality. And sitting in the passenger seat is a girl in glasses named Shelley, who's also kind of there, I guess. Whatever the case, the three of them almost hit a pedestrian, I know what you did last summer style, but Sue manages to swerve away just in time. And regardless, they don't even realize that the guy was already dead and rotting. Hey look, it's Clint Eastwood. From there, we shift over to a funeral parlor on the edge of town, run by Harmon and Darlene Love, who, I guess, live in this morgue for some reason. Whatever. As it were, Darlene is humming to herself when she is disturbed by a loud crash coming from the cooler. She calls out her husband's name, and the man comes flying through the door, screaming at her to quickly lock it behind him. Darlene asks Harmon what is going on, but he just pants and says that he doesn't know what he just saw. He shakily pours himself a drink and slams it down before concluding that they need to call the police right now. And as that's happening, we return to the girls, who are chatting about life and stuff. Sue looks over her shoulder to the back seat and teases Jenny for being a goody two-shoes and being inexperienced romantically. And in return, Jenny and Shelley both make fun of Sue for being, more sexually open. The cheerleader calls them buzzkills, and Jenny mutters under her breath that she'd be surprised. And then the homecoming queen clears her throat and asks Sue to pull over by a table near the building they just passed. Shelley and Sue ask Jenny where the hell she thinks she's going, and they protest that they're supposed to be at the pep rally, not lollygagging around the park for no reason. But Jenny tells them to wait, because she's meeting someone here. It's Johnny Love, the town's local douchebag. Oh, and he's also the son of that couple at the morgue. Anyway, Sue gets incredibly protective of her friend and tells the greaser to back off, but Johnny laughs in her face and calls her a spoiled daddy's girl. Jenny tries to defuse the situation by announcing that she and Johnny are together, and they actually have been for a while now. But Sue huffs and exclaims that this is bullshit. She gets in Johnny's face and calls him a performative loser. And in response, Ponyboy here pulls out a knife and threatens to ruin her clothing if she doesn't stop yapping. So Sue and Shelley angrily retreat, and the head cheerleader shrieks that this isn't over. She's going to tell her boyfriend that Johnny threatened her, and she vows to also inform Jenny's on and off again ex-boyfriend, Bobby Ray, of what's going on. So, yeah, they speed off, leaving Jenny and Johnny behind in the dust. The two brace each other, and note that Bobby Ray is going to be pissed off about this one, but the thought quickly subsides. Both of them are eager to share important news with the other. Johnny goes first, proudly declaring that yesterday he enlisted so he can be a sniper like his brother at Firebase Ares in Vietnam. Jenny quickly turns away and tries to hold back her tears. She doesn't share her news, but by the way she's touching her stomach, I think we can deduce what's going on here. And on that note, we return to the funeral home, where a police officer has finally showed up. And just in time too, because a pair of powerful bluish hands are currently smashing down the door. But this is not the main sheriff Harmon and Darlene were hoping for. No, this is just some junior officer. Apparently, the much more experienced sheriff is tied up with this major highway crash by the high school. But you know what? Maybe this new guy's got what it takes. Oh, never mind. Yeah, the officer gets jumped by what are most definitely the scariest looking zombies in the entire series. Seriously, take a look at this fucking guy. It straight up tears the officer's nose off with its teeth, and all the while Darlene and Harmon fight for their lives with whatever nearby objects they can get their hands on. But unfortunately, amidst the chaos, Darlene winds up getting bitten in the calf by a reanimated corpse of a little girl. She screams in pain and bashes the creature's head in, and Harmon helps her to her feet, urging that they need to get to a doctor, pronto. And we also get one final look at the big boy zombie, who has absolutely fucking destroyed the officer for pretty much no reason. Seriously, Unc be looking like that time Blob ate the wasp. Regardless, we transition over back to the Harbinger High School, where a young couple is starting to get frisky in a red pickup truck. Apparently the guy here is actually Shelley's boyfriend, but right now, Gup's desperate to grab a handful of another girl's Totos. Well, they got a little bit of an audience tonight, because encircling them is a horde of salivating zombies eager to satiate their hunger. And it's not just those kids who are screwed. No, the entire high school is about to be under siege. As it turns out, that major highway crash the sheriff was busy with That was the rival high school's team, and they're not about to miss the big game. Meanwhile, across town, a car comes to a screeching halt outside of a large house. The car door slams shut, and Harmon Love sprints toward the porch, where there is a slouched-over older man with his eyes closed. The man is a retired doctor, and Harmon shakes him awake and shouts that his wife needs immediate medical assistance. But the old doctor is hella drunk, and when he hears that Darlene was bitten, he pulls a gun out on Harmon and forcefully orders him to get the fuck out. But then there's this loud crash from inside the doctor's home, and the man quietly whispers that 2 hours ago, a mother rushed over to his house, carrying her heavily injured son. The lad had accidentally cut himself and was rapidly bleeding out. With tears running down his face, the doctor recounts that he was unable to help the boy, and he died. The mother wailed for her loss, but as she was doing so, in a sudden flash of movement, her son came back to life and ripped the flesh out of her neck. The boy began mindlessly feasting on his mother like a pig, and so the doctor shot him cold in the head. But then the mom came back, and the doctor ran out the door in fright. The doctor sadly shakes his head, and he advises Harmon that if Darlene was truly bitten, he needs to take her to a secluded spot in the woods and say goodbye. Harmon's heart drops, and as he drives away, he cannot hide his tortured anguish. And from there, we jump back over to the park, where Johnny and Jenny are arguing over his enlistment. Johnny argues that there's nothing for him in this podunk town, and Jenny immediately snaps back, asking if that includes her. She bitterly remarks that he's about to go run off to Vietnam and leave them on edge every single day, dreading the moment that they should receive bad news. Johnny tries to calm her down, assuring her that he's not going to die and he's doing it for them. He wants to marry Jenny and be with her forever. He pulls her closer, and Johnny asks her why she was speaking in a plural we earlier. But just then, their attention is diverted because they hear gunshots from the direction of the school. So the pair hop onto Johnny's motorcycle, and they set off to go check it out. Yeah, so as you can imagine, shit's about to go down at the high school. But right now, though, it's the calm before the storm. You know, the final moments where petty grievances hold any resonant weight. Sue, in the clutches of her man, informs Johnny's ex, Bobby Ray, about her new relationship, and the jock about has an aneurysm. Shelley, for her part, has had enough of the drama, and with a hand on her hip, she tells off everyone for wasting their time on this dumbass shit. But then the shotgun starts going off, and the topless girl from before comes out of nowhere, screaming and sliding around in the mud. The girl shrieks that they're eating Dean. And yeah, obviously Shelley's pissed because that was her boyfriend, but now's not the time. So they hand the girl a shirt, and Bobby Ray dashes to his car to retrieve his hunting rifle. And immediately, the undead decide to pay a visit, starting with the rival high school's mascot, who utters a menacing roar and lunges at the group. Bobby Ray shoots the beast in the chest, but to his disbelief, it does nothing to stop it. But as fate would have it, Johnny races into the parking lot and runs over the zombie, turning its head into mush with his tires. But Bobby Ray is not at all thankful, and when he sees the man who cucked him, he convulses with rage. He calls Jenny a cheating bitch, and she replies that she's not his girl and hasn't been so for a long time. Bobby Ray is seething. He raises his gun at the couple and squeezes the trigger, but Sue jumps on him right at that moment, ruining his shot. The jock throws her with full force, inadvertently pushing her directly into the claws of a pair of zombies who tear her fucking head off. Shelly yelps for her slain friend, and Bobby Ray whips around in surprise and tries to shoot the monsters, but only manages to headshot Shelly in his confusion. So yeah, this idiot somehow managed to kill 2 innocent people in the span of like 30 seconds. So Johnny pulls out his switchblade and rushes at Bobby Ray. The greaser right hooks the SOB, knocking him onto his back. But Bobby Ray immediately fumbles for his gun, and with a look of pure hatred, he cocks his rifle and aims it at Johnny. But then, out of nowhere, his head explodes. It's Harmon, who blasted the bastard Bobby Ray to protect his son. And the sheriff's there too, and he decides to look the other way on this one. Jenny and Sue's boyfriend are inconsolable after the death of their friends, so Johnny, Harmon, and the sheriff team up and spend the entire night cleaning up the school by exterminating the vermin. And with that, cruel night becomes mournful morning, and the survivors hold a makeshift funeral for their fallen friends and family. And there is this strange feeling of uncertainty that engulfs them all. The world as they knew it is definitively over. The sheriff comments that the town seems pretty secure for now, but who knows how long that'll last. But in any case, Jenny and Johnny don't plan to stick around. It's the end of the world, and they might as well see it. Harmon watches as the couple departs, solemnly remarking that Jenny is pregnant, and it's a hell of a thing to bring a baby into this new world. But the sheriff reminds him that the two just made it through the night, so they're clearly made of sterner stuff. But more importantly, they have each other, and if anything is going to get them through this, it must be the power of love. And on that note, we conclude our second tale here. What is that? New story alert? New story alert. Our next entry is titled Dodgers, and it has the exact same creative team as the previous story. So, yeah, what are we waiting for? Our story begins with a cold open, which works out on multiple different levels. We find ourselves in the snowy mountains of Canada, of course, on February 13th, 1968. And it would almost be a beautiful and tranquil scene, if not for the crass villainy perverting the purity. A greasy, homeless-looking man chortles and shamelessly rifles through a group of dead bodies. We're told that there just was a brutal standoff between a group of robbers and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, which resulted in all of their mutual destructions. However, one of the robbers was hiding in the trees, and now that the coast is clear, he's popped out his smirking face. His name is Newell Hobbs, and he taunts an injured officer and chuckles to himself before coldly shooting the man dead. So, with the mood set, we leave the mountainside and meet our main cast, who are just now about to pull into the quaint little town down below. It's 3 young adults who are bickering over the lackluster driving skills of the woman behind the wheel. Her name is Mel, and she has a propensity to swerve around a lot, as well as a chronic inability to keep her eyes on the road. But she tells her passengers to shut up, cause she's kind of doing them a big favor. You see, they're twin brothers, named Bobby and Doug, who have fled to Canada to escape the Vietnam War draft. And for clarity purposes, I'll point out that Bobby is the clean-shaven one, and Doug is the one with the Chester Arthur tier facial hair. Seriously, what's wrong with you, dog? Whatever the case, Mel slams on the brakes because up ahead, the road is blocked off by a police car. The officer tells him there was some kind of accident at the local concrete plant, and the main road is shut down for now, so they're gonna need to have to find another way into the town. The twins are super tense and holding their breath through this entire interaction, but the jolly officer just apologizes for the inconvenience, and he welcomes the Americans to Canada. From there, we return to the mountains to find that slobbering Hobbs fellow tying a couple of dead bodies to a dog sled. He then sharply orders the dogs to mush, and the canines take off back home with their load. I don't know why he bothered with all that, but whatever. Anyway, Hobbs makes one final sweep of the battlefield and observes his fallen fellow criminals, and he greedily rubs his hands, 'cause after all, now he gets to have all the money they stole to himself, without having to split it. So Hobbs gets on another sled and departs, but as he's leaving, he's unaware that the stiff bodies have begun shifting around, and soon enough they spring straight out of the earth. Hungry. Always hungry. And ditto for that sled of dead bodies he sent down the mountain. They come back too. Anyway, we hard cut into town, which is currently in the middle of a ruckus. A girl in a pink cap rushes outside to discover a crashed ambulance and two officers standing over a bloodied body. One of the men is panicking and repeating that the guy had just tried to bite him, and when the body ever so slightly twitches, he immediately headshots it, much to the bystanders' horror. But the girl doesn't dwell on it because she is suddenly distracted by a bear hug by Mel, who is ecstatic to see her. Her name is Claire, and she's who the group was coming here to meet. So, yeah, Claire is the one in the pink hat, and Mel is in the green. Anyway, Claire shakes hands with the Draft Dodger twins, and they tell her to keep that shit on the down low, but the girl replies that the Canadian government doesn't care about that, or hunt down and kick out draft refugees, but the conversation is cut off there because they awkwardly remember that there's a literal dead body 2 feet away from them in the middle of the road. So, yeah, they decide to bail and get in their car and leave. As it turns out, they're heading up the mountains to Claire's uncle's cabin, where they're planning to live or something, I guess, until the war's over. Also, apparently Bobby and Claire are in a relationship or something. They keep getting real comfortable in the back seat, but I don't know how you manage an international relationship in the 60s, but whatever. Anyway, Claire also shares the word she heard on the street about the strange goings-on. The story goes that a team of men rigged an explosion at the gravel mine and then used that distraction to rob the accountant's office at the concrete manufacturing plant. The word is that a lot of the miners were seriously injured during the explosion, and the police chased the robbers up the mountains. But all of this bad news is kind of ruining the vibe, so the 4 young adults decide to drop the subject and focus on getting to the cabin in one piece. We then get a totally random sequence from the mountainside, where a young lad is soaring through the chill mountain air on his skis. He's having the absolute time of his life, and he has this shit-eating grin on his face, because speeding after him is a topless chick who crashes and burns. She laughs it off, though, and tells her boyfriend to grab her jacket. But this fucking guy, instead, decides to selflessly cup his hands around her pups to keep them nice and warm. Woo! Hell yeah, man. I love frostbite. Yeah! Anyway, the fun's over, cause Romeo here gets his shit rocked by one of those Mountie police zombies, who, as you can see, are roaming around the peaks and valleys, hunting for some tasty flesh. So yeah, not great, but what's even more unepic than that is a familiar vehicle, off-roaded and abandoned. Yeah, okay, Mel wasn't paying attention again, and she crashed the fucking car. So, nice one. Now they're stuck trudging along with their luggage in the middle of nowhere. They're not even 100% certain where they are or if they even took the right road, but when Doug spots heavy smoke in the distance, they assume it must miraculously be Claire's cabin. So they all scurry over there and find a simple, isolated log cabin. They cautiously open the door and call out, asking if anyone's home. There is only silence and no response, so they decide to push on in. And what they discover there sends shivers down their spines. It's a table covered with dynamite, bullets, and blueprints for the concrete plant. Everyone starts freaking out because they obviously just stumbled upon the headquarters of those violent and, at this point, undoubtedly desperate robbers who could be back at any minute. So Mel suggests that they get out of there, but Doug points out that it's -10 degrees outside and there's a blizzard, so they're not going anywhere, at least not till morning. So they're going to have to lock down and get on the defensive, just in case. So everyone starts arming themselves, somber in their awareness that they had tried to escape a war, only to find themselves trapped in another. And unfortunately, their intuition is more correct than they know, because rolling up to the cabin on his dog sled is that scumbag Hobbs. He was busy burying all of his stolen treasure, but now he's returned, and someone's in his house. His eyes brighten, and the man pulls out a gun, 'cause he's about to have some fun. But unknown to Hobbs, his party's about to be crashed by a flock of staggering zombies coming to their location from another direction. From there, we cut away and introduce a completely new subplot at the town's clinic. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, this tangent is pretty irrelevant to the story. However, in the barest way, it does connect to the 68 finale, so I guess I'll speed through it. Basically, at the small clinic is a low-ranking constable and a nurse who are discussing the influx of patients and the general madness going on when a trembling figure walks through the entrance. It's a woman who introduces herself as Catherine. She sobs and begs for help because her husband's missing. He's a part of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, but she can't get a hold of him and she's really scared. The constable promises her that it's going to be all right, but then they hear a gunshot from one of the patient rooms and they all sprint to go check it out. It's the doctor, who just executed a patient who had come back to life and bitten him. The doctor knew something was up, and he got way too close to the patient. But he did manage to test their blood, and in his hasty analysis, he's led to believe that they're dealing with a heavily virulent, blood-borne contagion that can spread through bite. And, well, obviously he's been bitten, so he abruptly stuffs the gun in his own mouth, and he pulls the trigger. Right, yeah, so that's pretty much the subplot. As it were, we return to our friends in the cabin. At present, the girls are discussing the peculiar ritual the twins are undergoing right now. They're standing next to each other in total silence, holding hands with their eyes closed. Mel explains to Claire that this is a childhood coping mechanism they adopted when shit got real. And right they are, because all of a sudden, bullets start ripping through the flimsy wooden door. It's that greaseball Hobbs, of course, camping outside firing at them and cackling like a maniac. He tells them to come out, but Claire instead returns fire, sending the man scrambling into the tree line. Hobbs was definitely not expecting that. However, he welcomes the challenge. He digs around in his bag and pulls out a longer-range rifle. The group inside is ignorant of that, however, and unfortunately, when Mel stands up near the window, she gets sniped by the self-satisfied creep. The girl collapses and starts profusely bleeding and choking on her own blood. Doug tightly clutches her, and Mel weakly sputters that she wants to go home. And Doug confesses that he loves her, and she cries as she takes her final breath. Doug howls in anguish, and it's with such pain that it even affects his brother, who snatches the shotgun and darts out the door. Bobby charges at Hobbs in pure, unfettered rage, and the criminal is about to shoot the impulsive boy when he is ambushed by that topless ski girl, who's now undead and starving. Hobbs pistol whips the zombie, and for the first time in all of this, he's at a total loss for words, and he has no idea what the fuck he's looking at. So he pretty much just defaults to what's familiar and shoots her a couple times. And he's about to kneel down and grab a handful when he himself gets shot in the shoulder. He totally forgot about Bobby, and the kid flatly utters that he killed their friend, and Hobb begs for the boy to wait, promising him a share of the money he buried. But Bobby doesn't give a shit about money, and there's no amount that will ever bring Mel back, so he raises his gun at the villain. But unfortunately, he never gets to take the shot. A police officer zombie has taken advantage of the kid's distraction, and he seizes onto the lad and buries his teeth into his neck. And Hobbs is no better off. For his part, he looks up to find a ghoul standing over him, and it starts eating his writhing face live. And as that happens, Bobby manages to stumble away, clutching his bleeding neck. Meanwhile, in the cabin, zombies have started throwing themselves at the survivors, literally jumping through the damn windows like a battering ram. And what's worse is that Claire is pretty much left to hold the fort all on her own. Doug has lost his senses and has hidden himself away in the corner somewhere, muttering wildly to himself. The guy hunches over and fiddles with a bundle of dynamite, which he lights as he clutches Mel's body. Claire discovers what the madman's done, and she dives out the window just as Bobby hobbles back to the cabin. There is a final growl heard when Mel returns from the dead, but it's quickly drowned out by the massive explosion that completely decimates the cabin and sends Claire flying through the air. And with that, the scene fades to black. About an hour later, a lone car traverses the empty and lonely roads. It's that constable, the nurse, and the police officer's wife from before. They discuss what they're going to do and where they're going to go, but it's really not important. It's basically just a framing device, because they drive past a patch of trees where a slumped-over girl sits perfectly still as a statue. It's Claire, who sadly didn't make it, and who froze to death, all alone out there. Well, she's not so alone anymore. She has her own kind now. And the story ends with her among the charred remains of the twins, who stand hand to hand once again, as in life, as in death. And thus concludes the story. And so now we proceed on to the next story, titled 68 Hardship, a 2011 one-shot, with art this time by Jeff Zernow. Yeah, so let's check it out, eh? Our story opens, get this, on February 14th, 1968, the day after the apocalypse began. That's right, we're moving on up, boys. Yeah, right, we're in Hitchcock County, Nebraska, known locally as Tornado Alley. And right from the get-go, things are kind of off. Essentially, the sheriff here and his deputies are doing a wellness check on the inhabitants of a remote farmhouse. They find and speak to a demented-looking young man named Teddy Calhoun, a soldier who just recently returned home from Vietnam. The officers ask him where his mother is, because yesterday, before shit hit the fan, the town doctor came to the house and reported that Teddy's mother was sick and dying. And you see, it's early enough into Armageddon that the police still entertain the delusion that they'll be able to snuff out and contain this problem if they're quick enough. But regardless, they get nothing out of Teddy. He just stares at them with daggers in his eyes. So the officers proceed slowly up to the porch, weapons poised and ready in case the mother has already succumbed to monsterdom. But when they open the door, they pull a string, which activates a claymore mine at their feet. The officers are instantly ripped to pieces in an explosion that doesn't even slightly rouse the attention of the brooding Teddy. He gets up and looms over an officer, missing both his legs, and remarks that his mother got better, and that he brought some toys home from Vietnam to use against Charlie. And so we find out that Teddy is hallucinating, because in his eyes, the police genuinely were the Viet Cong. But with the quote-unquote threat neutralized and his house now completely destroyed, he slowly waltzes over to the barn. He opens it to find a trembling young boy clutching onto a gun with both hands. He's Teddy's younger brother, Jake Calhoun. And right now, Jake is drowning in fear for 3 reasons. Well, number 1, he just heard, the explosion outside and has no idea what that's about. Number 2, the radio is constantly emergency broadcasting about the dead roaming the earth and eating people. And because, number 3, his older brother is a screaming lunatic who denies that the first 2 causes even happened. Yeah, Teddy's convinced that the whole zombie thing is a Viet Cong psyop, but obviously his kid brother has no idea what any of that means, so he just cries helplessly. And I guess there's actually kind of a 4th reason for concern. You see, their mother is in fact still around, just not exactly alive. Nah, she's a rotting zombie with maggots pouring out of her decaying flesh. Teddy's still convinced that she's alright and normal though, I guess, but some part of him must know that's not quite correct because he tosses her a bag of the officer's limbs as medicine. And as our protagonist watches his mom gobble the meat, he slips into a flashback from about 4 weeks ago when he was still in Vietnam. He was actually at Firebase Ares, and believe it or not, it was Lieutenant Thomas Blake from the original one-shot story. He was the one who reported Teddy's disturbed behavior. Apparently, on a patrol, Teddy had killed 2 fellow soldiers in a friendly fire incident, and the other survivors reported that they don't think he can distinguish them from the enemy anymore. So Lieutenant Blake filed a rare hardship discharge on Teddy to get him the hell out of the army. Anyway, he's snapped back to reality by Jake, who feebly whispers that he thinks their mom is dead. And this causes Teddy to erupt, and he forcefully knocks his brother across the room and gets in his face, roaring that he should not talk about their mom that way. Jake shields himself and cries that that's not her anymore, and Jake even bravely ventures to suggest that Teddy isn't quite right in the head either. Ever since he got home from Vietnam, something has been seriously wrong. And it's not just Jake who's noticed. People like Teddy's childhood love, Linda, have picked up on this too. And hearing that name sends Teddy into another flashback from a couple weeks ago when he met up with Linda in a car by the side of the road. The girl tearfully recounted about how she thought Teddy was dead because he stopped writing to her, and the letters she sent to him were getting returned unopened. And so Linda confesses to having had a one-time frisk with another boy who was courting her, named Derry. And I suppose in times of emotional upheaval, Teddy slips into his delusions to cope or something, because, well, he sees Linda as a Vietnamese prostitute, which he slaps across the face. Anyway, Teddy's mind returns to the present, and he storms out of the barn, ordering his brother to keep watch on their mom. He stomps over to the stable and pulls out a pair of binoculars, through which he sees a throng of zombies heading his way. The wind picks up, and he takes a second look, and now the monsters look Kong. So he revs up a harvester and brutally eviscerates them in an absolutely savage zombie kill of the week. Ted then picks out a cigarette, but he can barely light the damn thing because the wind is so strong at this point. And then he sees it. A twister, full force barreling in his direction. And he ain't no storm chaser, so he sprints back to the barn in great dismay. But things are rapidly unraveling everywhere he turns, and he walks in at the very moment Jake shoots their mom in the neck. Teddy howls and punches the kid in the back of the head. But at the same time he does that, he shouts out asking where Jake is, because in his eyes, he's just knocked down a Vietnamese boy. Jake desperately tries to convince his brother that it's him, but unfortunately, Teddy can't reason, and he blows the poor lad's brains out. And immediately after, their mom latches onto Teddy like a leech, and the scene fades to black, with nothing but the sounds of wind, gunshots, and screaming. The next morning, Linda pulls up to the destroyed farm. She calls out for any of the Calhoun family, but really, she's there for Teddy. She loves him, and she refuses to leave without making their relationship work. She cautiously paces into the rubble that was the barn, and she freezes in horror upon the discovery of the sickly pale Teddy, who lunges at her before she can even react. And so the story ends, with the figure of Teddy Calhoun swaying down the highway, carrying what's left of Linda's body, grunting and stuffing his mouth full of her bloodied entrails. Eyes wide to horizon, where the madness never ends. Alright, this is it. The final story in today's video. 2015's 68 Bad Sign. A one-shot with art done by Richard Bonk. Obviously this one is about the Zodiac killer. And remember, all we know about him is that he's a guy named Ronnie. And we met his brother and mother last video. So with that in mind, let's get into it. Our story opens in San Francisco on February 28th, 1968. Already a few weeks into the madness. The world kept spinning though, just not very brightly anymore. We see a bound woman being dragged around, screaming for help. It's fruitless though. Her captor pulls her to a trap door, mercilessly. And so we see him, the Zodiac killer. And he taunts the poor girl by holding her over a pit of zombies. We also get a closer look at him and his unconventional fashion. Both his facial mask and clothing appear to be homemade and stitched together from random scraps. But frankly, he just kind of looks like a fucking creep. And to elucidate that, I guess, he slices off the girl's tongue and feeds her to the monsters. Afterward, he tosses the muscle into a frying pan to have as a nice snack later. All the while he monologues to himself, basically about his backstory and vision. He recounts how his mother had always wanted a little girl, however, it never did work out that way. She instead had 2 boys and 2 stillborns. But this was not at all acceptable to her. His mother was going to have her girls. And so she forced her sons to dress like and behave as females. And, we're told that every month she found a way to make them bleed. However, Zodiac is convinced that none of that is the reason he ended up like this. No, he thinks it was by his own design. You see, he sees himself as an honest-to-God artist who's expressing himself with his depraved acts. Oh, and by the way, as to his stillborn siblings, yeah, he keeps them with him in a veil of formaldehyde. Right, and as it turns out, all of that information I just relayed to you was actually the contents of a letter the Zodiac Killer had sent to what remains of the San Francisco Police Department. They're down to just a skeleton crew, and most of the remainders were promoted up from mole cop and meter maid. I don't even know how and why the police are still running during a zombie apocalypse, but whatever. As it were, the mustached officer here goes by Rakowski, and the woman is named Angie. And these two are the only ones on the Zodiac case. And right now they're having sex to relieve the tension, I guess. Whatever the case, they want to nail this sicko. And Angie actually has a personal stake in this because her own cousin was a victim of the serial killer. So the pair get to work. They carefully read and reread the letter over and over again. And eventually, Angie is the first to notice that it's not written on paper. It's written on a priest collar. And so the officers have a lead. So they rush outside to do two things. Firstly, to meet with the freelance photographer who discovered the letter and gave it to the police. And second, to proceed to the last still functioning church left in the city. Right, so they find the photographer right away, hanging outside the station. He's this squirmy guy in glasses, named Eddie Malvern. He's a little bit out there and spacey, and his social cues are a couple of beats off, but he seems eager to share the information he knows. Eddie recounts how he was taking some photos when he discovered the Zodiac's letter in a brown envelope taped to a fence. The mustached Rakowski cuts him off there and demands to know what happened to the envelope, and when Eddie admits to tossing it, he becomes angry and storms away, calling the photographer a fucking idiot, cause that could have had fingerprints on it. Angie looks at Eddie sympathetically, and she tells him that it's okay and to keep his chin up. She warmly wishes him well, and he mutters back, "Good luck," under his breath. So the two officers fight their way across town to the church, accompanied by two National Guardsmen who are escorting them. But as it turns out, they're being closely monitored at a distance by the Zodiac Killer. He has a particular fascination with Angie, who he identifies as a pretty little girl, and he openly wonders what she tastes like when she screams. Yeah. He also gets really excited because they have finally found what he calls his masterpiece, which is the priest strung up on a cross in a cruel crucifixion with his face ripped off and half sewn back on in a permanent shriek. One of the guardsmen starts throwing up, and Angie comes to the disturbing realization that the Zodiac wanted them to make the priest-church connection. It's a trap. And as soon as those words are uttered, a bullet rips through a guardsman's skull, killing him instantly. The officers whip around in panic, unable to locate the source, and then, out of the smoke, flies in Zodiac on a motorcycle, and he executes the other guardsmen. The officers yell at him to freeze, but the killer spits back that he's an expert shot and a quicker draw, and they have short-range guns only. He threatens to blow Angie's brains out if they don't comply, so they drop their weapons and Zodiac purrs. He proudly announces that he made himself a new friend, Eddie Malvern, who he has captured in his base. Zodiac tells the officers they have just 15 minutes to save him, and he tosses them an envelope with an address on it, and he speeds off. Rutkowski points out that this is obviously a trap, but when he looks in the envelope and discovers a pair of severed lips and a tongue, he realizes this is a risk they're going to have to take. The psycho needs to be put down, and this is the best chance they got. It takes them 12 whole minutes to find and make their way to the address, which turns out to be a moldy warehouse in an alleyway. They pull open the door and nearly vomit. The place is overwhelming with a putrid smell of rotting meat, and the place is strangely decorated with all these posters of the same child actress. But our heroes don't have time to contemplate that, because they hear the creepy voice going, "Yoo-hoo, detectives!" So the officers take a deep breath and slowly climb up the stairs. They are met by Zodiac in a gimp suit, pointing a gun at them and another at an obscured figure tied to a chair. Rutkowski orders him to drop it because it's over, and in a rage, the madman stamps his foot down, asking how they don't get it yet. In Zodiac's mind, he's won, and all his hard work has finally paid off. He tells the officers they have no idea how hard it is to be told you were born wrong by your own mother, to be forced in public and paraded around as a cheap mockery of the other sex. And that was just a half of it, because it worked superficially when they were younger, but once puberty hit, this act became hard to sell. Zodiac's mother tried shaving them and hiding the truth as best she could, but eventually she resorted to, cutting her sons. Alright, yeah, this one's way above my pay grade. Anyway, the officers are dead silent as Zodiac starts doing interpretive dance in front of them. He gleefully sings that he ran to California to be himself and practice his art. And now, for the first time in his life, he has finally been seen. The newspapers, TV stations, they can't stop talking about him and his work. Zodiac declares that the fame has given him power, and the power has enabled him to raise the dead to be his slaves. And the officers' eyes bulge out of their heads because the freak tears off his mask to reveal his true identity. He is Eddie Malvern. The two sides start shooting at each other, and Rutkowski gets shot in the shoulder, prompting Angie to return fire. She misses Zodiac, but winds up striking the cartridges carrying the stillborns, and it spills the contents all over the floor. Zodiac lets out an animal shriek and starts wildly blasting at Angie. Rutkowski, with everything he has left in him, charges at the killer and body slams him with full force out the window. The officers cautiously peek down below and witness the broken man laying paralyzed in a pool of blood forming underneath his head. And pretty soon, the infamous villain has visitors. Several decaying hands grasp onto him, and they disembowel him in the dirty street. All the while he screams his head off, just like so many victims did under his own hands. Angie and Rutkowski watch all of this with grim resolve, and they quietly head back to the station and agree that tonight they're going to need a lot of drinks. And on that note, we conclude the tale of 68 Bad Sign, the final story in our Twisted collection.
Kowalski, analysis.
Right. So that was another 68 video for you. Just the finale left now. It only took a couple of months for us to get through the series for some reason. We'll get more into it next video, but I won't start another series without already having worked on it beforehand going forward. But anyway, what were your thoughts on today's stories? Which one was your favorite? feel free to drop your rankings of them in the comment section. If I had to pick, personally, I would say that Peece and Love was probably my favorite one. I think it had the tightest plot, as well as it was the most thematically rich. Right, there is nothing more tied to, the passage of youth than sports games, pep rallies, dances, and all the rest. And by extension, that's kind of like the normal, safe Americana, in a sense. So when the zombie apocalypse comes, it, rips apart all that comfortable structure, and it forces the kids to become adults prematurely. And that provides for a stark contrast. And like I said, I also think the story was also the most on topic of the collection. Like, I thought Dodgers had a really good premise, but it didn't quite manage to reach the same heights because it got distracted by random filler stuffed into the story. Likewise with a couple of others. But that's just my opinion. I seriously won't touch that Zodiac killer story, though, at all. Sorry. But that about does it for today's video. There's not really much for me. Okay, there's so many different stories that I don't really have like a broad thesis or takeaway. I mean, it was cool to see the rest of the United States and Canada, how they were faring, I guess. But outside of that, like I said, I don't really have much else to say. But outside of this video, there are a lot of things in development in regard to the unwritten world, okay? I'm sure most of you are like, just put the video in the bag, little bro, but to the cross section that is interested, sooner rather than later, I will start producing full-on theories and proposals on my third channel, Unwritten Live. It'll be more on the boring and technical side of things, and it's not really storytime content, but I'm kind of excited for it, but enough with all that. Yeah, I'll see you guys soon for the 68 finale. Until then, I will thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good one.